It says audio stream started, so I don't know why it did that. I'm turning Michael on. Hopefully we are still working here. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome everybody. Delighted that you're here, and it's an honor to take this all to the next level as we move forward. And Jeanie, I'm going to turn over to you for just another second, and I'm going to see if I can turn some alarms on here.
And we are getting there. We're learning, and we do have it says 6 listeners, so we're glad that you're with us. And we've been in touch with the people at Podetize. I've actually created a page on the website that has Podetize player on it. And I may have to make some changes on it because right now it's showing every single show. And what I'd like for it to do is to break it down by year or month. So we'll see how that works. But they are working on getting all of the archives from Blog Talk. And, you know, some of our very early shows were actually on another channel called Earth Angels Radio or Enlightened Masters or something. And so that may be challenging for him because, you know, the transfer for the Mindshifters Radio on those earlier, older titles, those wouldn't transfer under that name. So I'm sure it's giving him a challenge as well.
We're learning. And so delighted that you're here. Thank you for joining us. And our topic today is to move forward with the work we've been doing from the Book of Thomas. So we'll be moving in that direction. Give me 1 second. As we're moving forward, we're getting lots of opportunities to learn forgiveness and to look at technology here. So this is a really awesome new app that has been generously offered to us, and we're deeply appreciative, especially for all the support we're getting with it and our learning curve. And so much appreciation. And hopefully I'm coming across one of the things I really like about the app is the clarity of the voice is so much better than Blog Talk has been for the last 15 years. Where have you been all our lives? But anyway, we're here, and we're going to step into the Book of Thomas. If you're not familiar with the Book of Thomas, it's one of the texts that was not canonized at the Council of Nicaea. It was rejected as a something that Constantine, who was a warmonger, basically, it didn't feel like it supported him, so it didn't get to be one of the canonized books. But it purports to be sayings written down, the inner sayings, the inner teachings that lead people within, in a world where, the Pharisees of the day had people focused in the outer world. It was all about following rituals and, right down to you had to wash your hands before you ate. But they measured, it got this silly in terms of rules to be followed. You had to put your hands so deep in the water, they actually measured. And if you didn't go deep enough, then your hands hadn't been washed and you'd broken the law and now you were a sinner. Just really crazy. Exoteric, looking to the outer world, and we look today and people try to follow some sort of an outer set of rules. And our objective is to recognize what human life is. That's the number one step here, because most people have forgotten who they are. And the best way I know to recognize human life is take one that's fresh. Start from the beginning, not one that's been tainted and beat up by the world, but take a newborn. Hold the newborn. And this is a question, as most of you know, that Jeanie and I have asked of tens of thousands of people over the years. Hold the newborn and tap into the essence of that newborn. And so we've asked this question of tens of thousands of people, and 100% of the time, we always get a word. We ask people to put it into one word, and we always get a word that can be boiled down to or points to the state of being love. And so, and we've done this, asked this question all over the world in many, many different cultures. And every culture uses some word, sweetness, purity, presence, the word love. Everything points to that. And then, of course, I ask people, so as you hold that newborn, is the newborn loving you, or is the newborn love? And we come across one of the first word destruction examples in our culture. And we've been brought up in a culture, by and large, this Western culture, whose specialty is knocking the experience of the presence of love out of us, and then along about the age of 14, 15, 16, pushing us out the door and saying, now go find somebody to love you, as though love was a verb. Go find somebody to love, as though love is something you can do. And that's what gets people stuck in the external doing world. Oh, you got to put your hands deep enough in the water so they're really washed. You got to follow this rule, that rule, that rule, that rule, that rule. Then you'll have a human life. No, you'll have a human life when you have a human life. When you realize who you are. When you realize that the word love is a noun, it reflects a state of human existence that can be distorted and covered up, lost to experience by buying into a world of hostility, fear, and in many cases, rules. You know, if you took, let's say, the most perfect one, let's take any of the masters from down through the ages and watch their behaviors. Let's follow them around for 5 years and write down everything they do. This perfect person functioning from a state of love, write down everything they do. And now let's turn it into a list and hand it to somebody who's filled with rage and guilt and fear and hatred and vengeance, you know, all the garbage of the world. And say, here, do these things and then you'll have love. No, they won't. You can go do everything on the list. You can check off, you know, if you spent 5 years watching this master that lived from a state of love, you could check off every behavior. And the person who's holding unconscious hostility and fear and all that other garbage, love is still not going to be present in them, though they did all of the behaviors. And that's the problem with the Pharisaical mind. So this saying 102, Yeshua says, woe to them, the Pharisees. They're like a dog sleeping in the manger of the cattle, for they neither eat nor do they let the cattle eat. Well, what the heck? Pharisees are like a dog in a manger. What's he saying? He's saying they're working in the wrong realm. They're working in an incorrect place. They're saying, here, follow these rules, then you'll produce a result. No, what the rules look like are the result of being a human being. So this is an old parable. It's been around longer than the scriptures have been telling it, far before that. So what happens? The cattle go to the manger to eat. It's filled with straw. The dog's laying in the manger. Dog won't eat straw. So he's saying, you're like a dog sleeping in a manger. You're not where you're supposed to be, dog, Pharisee. And so you have nothing to eat. And if the cattle come over, you bark at them and send them away, so they can't eat either. So in Matthew, we read, Yeshua says, woe you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You shut up the kingdom of heaven. What is this kingdom of heaven? It's again been made some mystical, magical thing. Vladimir Lenin, if you read his works, he's probably responsible for more deaths on planet Earth than anybody in history. And Vladimir Lenin said, if you want to destroy a culture, change the meaning of its words. That's how you destroy a culture. So what is this kingdom of heaven? Someplace off in the sky? No. In Aramaic, those words mean the community of love. People who gather together out of a connected space of functioning like a human being. So he says, so you shut people out. You're always on them with this bang, 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 smash, 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 punishment if you don't, keeping them in fear. So you shut up the community of love against men, and you don't go in yourselves. and you won't let anybody else go in. They've got to follow every little rule. So there's the dog in the manger. The dog's not going to eat the straw, and the Pharisee does not taste of themselves, of their own essence as love, because their minds are so busy trying to get the rules followed. So when you live in the world of perception, and to the mind of man, the belief is perception is the end all and be all. Whoever's got the best perceptual apparatus, they got it made. But perception is nothing but a set of pictures painted on the inside of our eyeballs by our own carbon-based memory system. People think they see through their eyes. The truth is, you've never seen anything through your eyes, and you never will see anything through your eyes. Well, Michael, what do you mean? I'm looking around the room right now. No, you're not. Let's look at the science. You want to take a deep dive into this idea? Go to YouTube and search for Anil, A-N-I-L, Seth, S-E-T-H. He's a neuroscientist, and he explains what's happening when we think we see something outside of us. The eye is literally an electronic device. It is a receiver of light energy. Light energy comes into the eye. It's an antenna. It's a one-way valve. You can't see out of it. Information comes in, and according to what's stored in the mind, resonated by that information, the mind creates pictures. The pictures are painted on the inside of our eyeballs, so we think we're looking out there, but we're not. Everything that shows up in perception is a product of what's firing within one's own carbon-based memory system. And so if you're always focused on the projected images from the pain parts of the mind, those pictures painted on the inside of your eyeballs, you're lost. You're stuck in the past. That's where he spoke about the dead who bury the dead, the blind who lead the blind. If you live in perception, you live in nothing but the past. It's called the replicant mind. Somebody, oh, that's right, it was me, I wrote a book about it. It's called Why Is This Happening to Me Again? As long as I'm living in my perceptual mind, carbon-based memory, until I change the content of that mind's simply going to replicate whatever's in it. 1,000 variations on the theme, but the theme will always be the same. We talked yesterday about the power person. And the fact that if you watch someone under stress, you know that they're doing exactly what their power person did to them that they hated the most. They're replicating what they hated the most. And that's all carbon-based memory can do, is replicate. We're looking to open the space to awaken to the newbornness of each of us, and the faculties that are introduced to the mind when our newbornness comes into expression. And they turn that into another external game. And now you've got to be born again, like it's got to do with the external world of flesh and blood. That wasn't what it was about. It was about awakening to the state of being. And if you're living in perception, you're living in a place you do not belong, just like the dog in that story. The person who lives in perception never eats of truth. And because another part of that game of perception is, as we spoke about yesterday, one who lives in perception by the age of 4 was a fully brainwashed, very devoted, devout religious member of the one world universal religion of blame, guilt, fault, shame, and victimhood. And the mind can only construct images based in that. So the animal won't eat, that the state of being is never tasted by one who lives there. And the Pharisees, just like the dog, prevent the animals from eating by they continuously harp on that which is meaningless. Oh, you didn't wash. Oh, you didn't follow this ritual. Oh, you didn't do that ritual. That's the trying to follow the letter of the law. And and here we come across another word that's been totally and completely bastardized by the Greek language. In Aramaic, the word law does not mean the rule of a superior. There's some superior that's really angry with you if you don't do everything that's on the list, i.e., you don't do all the external things, all the rules. There's no such creature exists. The Creator is made of the same stuff as we humans, the presence of love, and the objective is to let go of this harping on meaninglessness, soften what's going on in your tissue structure, breathe, and produce an experience of life directly experienced by you, not admiring somebody else who had an experience of functioning out of love. I mean, that can be a helpful model, but the objective of the work is for you to produce that experience. And especially when the stress is up and the chips are down. And the tendency is for carbon-based memory mind perception to kick into that power person dynamic. If you're aware of what's going on when your mind's kicking into its power person dynamics, you're halfway to having it defeated. So you'll remember they said the kingdom does not come by observation. What were they saying? You can't watch a person. If you're someone who functions from any form of unresolved generational hostility or fear, you can't observe somebody doing it perfectly and then do it perfectly and get the same experience. You've got to move the blocks to the experience out of carbon-based memory, open to the direct taste of yourself as that newborn energy, born again in some people's terms, but not the external game of it. So you can't make a list and check it twice. And vain replication of a set of behaviors that appear to be coming to love from love does not produce love. It's the other way around. It's functioning as the presence of love that produces the behaviors that people call loving. So when you function from what was called the kingdom of heaven, the idea was to get everybody to join to that, which is the community of love, those who function as human beings. And when you live in that kingdom, that community, and it's a real world experience, like, with your children. You've heard me say it many times. One of my favorite tongue-in-cheek lines is, having a child is like having your unconscious mind hang out in true living color and Dolby sound. Why? Because they're born of the same genes you are, and everything that you've never dealt with is in their genes, and bouncing off of your energy, they're going to do. And if you recognize that, and when you see that dynamic, then you realize, and we live on the punishment planet, you realize that punishment is simply the effort of an adult to try and get the child not to do what resonates with what the adult has not yet dealt. So everything gets turned around in this pharisaical mind. And the key tool, and there are a whole series of tools, I haven't sat down and listed them out recently, but several years ago I did do that, and there are about 35 or so different tools that we teach. And each one of them is used differently by each participant, depending on what stage one is at in their journey. I remember back several years ago, there was a woman in Florida who loved this work. She had come to 5 or 6 different intensives, like over a period of 7 or 8 years. She came to 5 or 6 different intensives, but she would never put the pen to the paper on the worksheet. She hated the worksheet. She loved everything else. She loved the still point breathing. Mind shifters were her favorite tool. And one year, Jeanie and I, she actually invited us and housed us in Fort Lauderdale. When we were doing a series of workshops there, and she attended every night. And it was after she'd been involved in the work for about 10 years or so. 2 weeks later, she wrote to me. She said, Michael, I just love this worksheet. It's my favorite tool. I can tell it anything, and it resolves things for me. So each person determines with practice which tool is most effective for them at any given time, and that changes over time. So remembering that forgiveness, again, to the Pharisaical mind, forgiveness is about the one world universal origin of blame. I'm in pain because of what you did. It's all your fault, but it's okay. I'll be big about it. I'll forgive you. And the Greeks totally mistranslated and misinterpreted that. So the word forgive in Aramaic is a tool with which, if you're in some form of hostility or fear inside, and you apply that tool, you literally remove. It's a tool of removal. You remove the very capacity of your structure to produce that particular form of hostility or fear. And it's the practice of the tools that empowers one to really effectively use them. So that is statement 102, and then we go on to 103. This one ties back into the Beatitudes. And Yeshua says, blessed is the man, and in Aramaic, again, the Greeks have interpreted that one, not translated it, interpreted. There are no Greek translations of the Bible, of the scriptures. There are Greek interpretations. You cannot call what has been done with those texts translations. They're interpretations. There is no translation of the word shebag in Greek that is accurate. That shebag means to cancel the goal that's driving your pain perception. That would be a proper translation. But what has it been made into? It's been interpreted as, oh, you see, it's their fault. This mind that has the Greek mindset lives in the one world universal religion of blame. So it's everybody else's fault. So now when I tell people to forgive, I tell them that, of course, since the problem is outside of you, you forgive them, you let them off the hook, and then everything will be okay. And it's backward. So in Aramaic, the Beatitudes, the first word in each of the Beatitudes is tuvehun. And this is another one of those things that is interpreted externally instead of internally. And so we're going to work toward turning it back around to what it really meant. So tuvehun, the opening words in each of the Beatitudes, rather than blessed are they, as though there's some sort of external force that's going to come along and bless you. In Aramaic, what that says is, and it's a word that, it's a three-part word, and there's nothing that even resembles it in the English language. There's no word that resembles this, tuvehun. It takes a whole paragraph. So tuvehun, properly translated, would say a latent neurostructure implanted by the Creator to guide you to happiness and well-being becomes your conscious possession, you who, and then the Beatitudes are a whole set of instructions for how to achieve that. So Yeshua is applying that idea here in statement 103 from the book of Thomas. And he's saying, blessed is the man who knows in what part the robbers are coming. In other words, where is the problem coming from? Now, of course, this will be another one of those that will be interpreted by the hostility and fear-based mind as one about war, but it's a metaphor for the internal process. So he says, knows which part the robbers are coming, that he may rise up and gather his domain and gird up his loins before they come in. And gird up his loins, he's got to get strong. We're going to have to do war. But no, this is not another external idea. No one has ever been blessed by war. People have occasionally benefited from war, and sadly now, with big money involved, too many people benefit from war. But there is no blessing in it. So we want to move back into the internal with this statement. So the opening of this statement would be more like, under the influence of the active neural structures that for most has been buried by unconsciousness, is the one who knows himself well enough to observe the circumstances in which he loses it. In other words, do you know what he's saying here is, you know the circumstances, you know the situations. I mean, do you lose it around kids? Is it when somebody disapproves of you? Is it when somebody gives you the look? Is it when somebody uses a voice in you? Is it when somebody takes something from you? You can tell what your power person dynamic is by the circumstance in which you mentally, emotionally tend to lose it. So he's saying, blessed are you're now, if you're doing your work in those circumstances, you'll be under the influence of this neural structure that the Creator planted in you to guide you to happiness and well-being. Again, blessed are they tuvehun, a latent neural structure implanted by the Creator to guide us to happiness and well-being becomes our conscious possession, and the Beatitudes is a whole set of instructions. Well, this is one that we could add to that. So one who knows himself well enough to observe the circumstances in which he loses it, knows the time, the place, or the circumstance. Is it the tightening in the body? This would be applied. If you know yourself well enough and you're able to, and we've said this often, one of the goals of this work is to develop the ability to step back from your own mind, become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions. If you know yourself and you know that there's old trauma, let's say, for instance, it's buried in your gut, then you'd notice that tightening in your body and you'd start to become on guard. Oh, something's coming up for me. Or the circumstance. You notice that here I am just going along, and all of a sudden I notice I'm holding my breath. I'm not conscious of anything at the moment. What Yeshua is doing is inviting people to be conscious and understand the circumstances ahead of time so that they can, quote unquote, gird up their loins. What does that mean? It means get the tools out. Get ready to use the tools. If you need support, ask for support. If it's a big issue that I don't have the skill or the strength to work through this yet, then you invite and you ask for support. So as the observer yourself, you notice when there's something in your mind or your nervous system that's in need of healing. And that which is in need of healing in this particular parable would be what Yeshua refers to as the robber or the brigand. If someone's aware enough to know when the robber's coming. What is the robber symbolic of? It's hostility and fear that robs us of our human lives. Learn and practice the tools so that if a major issue arrives, remember, we've talked about the vitality meter. And the vitality meter goes from 1 to 10. Let's imagine we've got somebody that's at level 5 vitality, and they have a level 7 toxin stored within their structure. Let's say something from their generations. Well, there's a built-in suppress mechanism. If you're at level 5 vitality, and you've got a level 7 toxin, your structure will not yield up or let that level 7 toxin go from wherever it is hidden in your structure. And it might be hidden by the tightness in your gut. It might be hidden by the fact that, you have avoided foods that contain vitamin D3, and therefore it becomes an interference pattern in your bones, whatever it is. So if one recognizes they're at a level 5 vitality and there's a level 7 toxin, then the desire is to do one's work until one can confront, can uncover or untie, loosen that level 7 toxicity. And so somebody does their work and goes to a level 5, from a level 5 vitality to a 6 and says, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. goes to a level 6.5, I feel great. Level 7, I feel better than I have in years. Level 7.5, and all hell breaks loose. Wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? I've been doing everything right. Why did all hell break loose? Oh, here's what Yeshua was talking about. You got to know yourself well enough to know what's going on here. If you're an observer of your breath and you find yourself shutting it down or altering your breath begins, then you know there's a sign that something internal, some of the internal darkness, he's speaking about in this particular saying, he's speaking about, the person in the night who knows when the enemy's coming and where they're coming from. So if you're aware enough to recognize, I've hit a new level of vitality, and now some of my internal darkness, the night, is rising in me. The robber, the hostility, the fear, the generational judgment, the pain, the trauma of my own serenity is arising from within. Now I'm going to be aware. What does he compare that to? He says that's like the person who sees the robber coming and he girds up his loins. That is, he gets out his tools and is ready. There's another translation of that, girds up his loins. It gathers the forces of his domain. And that would be, so this would be, you take out your tools and you arm yourself with those tools and you select, knowing yourself, which one operates best for you. Is it the still point breathing process? Is it the mind shifter tool? Is it the reality management forgiveness worksheet? Is it the codependence worksheet? Is it time to dig out the commitment? Which tool are you going to use? And that would be comparable in this particular metaphor for, gathering the forces of his domain. So then the carbon-based memory, this device that stores information, what was called the mind of man, that is the constructs of the body's mind, which we call perception, which are just a tiny fragment of actuality. Remember the Harvard research we refer to, in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. And when we don't want to be responsible for what's moving inside of us, what do we say? Look, I'm so upset about what they're doing. When I say I'm upset about what they're doing, what I'm saying is what's moving in me is caused by them. And that's our definition of denial. So when someone goes into denial, if I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's uncomfortable and moving inside of me, then I'm in denial. What denial results in is that, in essence, when I'm in denial, when I give my mind instructions, remember that 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing, when you're looking at 9 bits of data, you're looking at evidence. And something drives the evidential process. And what drives the whole evidential process is your goals. The goal you have for a thing, actually Einstein, that just saying those words reminds me of Einstein saying he takes it a step further. He says, the theory you have about a thing determines what you can observe about that thing. The goal you have for a thing determines which data your mind is going to use to produce your feelings, your emotions, the sensations in your body, and your perception. We did an intensive in Marsh Harbor in the Bahamas back, 30 some years ago. And there was a fellow that he wanted to get out in the ocean and swim, and he got himself caught in a riptide and almost drowned. And that became an example that we used in the workshop. This guy came in, and I mean, he looked like he was about to go off the deep end. He was covered in seaweed and sand. I mean, he had just about drowned. And we were talking about this idea of the evidential mind and how the goal you have for a thing determines what you observe. And so the example that I used in that particular workshop is, well, let's imagine that for this gentleman, I brought him here. He wanted to do some healing. He paid us for the workshop, and, we're here to support him. And imagine, cancel the thought, if he'd actually drowned. What kind of sadness, grief, responsibility, who knows what kind of things would have gone on in my mind at that point. It wouldn't have been a happy time. But the example that I used is, let's imagine that the person who invited that guy to the workshop, instead of inviting him to come and have a wonderful time and do some healing, really wanted to get into a relationship with his wife and wanted to set him up to drown. When that guy got caught in the riptide, he'd have been a happy man. The only difference in the circumstance was the goal for the circumstance or situation. So when you recognize that 9-bit construct in your mind called perception, if you're telling the mind, they made me, my mind has to hide the truth that this is something that's happening inside of me and belongs to me, has to hide that from me and hallucinate a world where I can tell a whole story about what they did and why it's all their fault. So what Yeshua is saying here is, that's the enemy, that's the thief, the robber that comes in the night. And if you're ready for it, if you understand yourself, if that is an ancient saying, know thyself. If you know yourself, then when your carbon-based memories, replicate lies come forward, if you're the person who's ready and know what's going on, you're going to be ready with the tools of truth and the conscious active presence of love. You're going to recognize the enemy is a product of your own mind. How many times have we said it? In order to truly heal, you got to be out of your mind. You can't play in the body's mind, in the replicate mind, and ever wake up to the truth of being. You just can't do it. And in this case, he's speaking of the enemy, and in truth, there's no such thing as an enemy. Most people interpret the quote-unquote enemy as the one who shows them or resonates what they're in denial of and are dissociated from, what it is that they don't want to deal with. When in fact, there is a conspiracy. All of life has always been conspiring to show you the parts of yourself which are disintegrative qualities of energy that need to be forgiven. And the purpose of life, I would offer, is to kick you right square in the limitation, to show you what your next piece of work is. And that is a blessing. That is a gift. In denial and dissociation, it doesn't feel like it. Again, denial, I have to hide something from myself. My mind now has to make up a lie. And it makes it up out of the data that's moving in my mind, focused on whoever I'm blaming. And my mind takes that data and builds it into a picture, which I think is them, but it's actually, once again, it's a picture painted on the inside of my eyeballs. It's an seeming external sighting of what's going on inside of me, as long as I'm in perception. And the genius of this man, Yeshua, I worked with this tool of forgiveness for 35 years before I finally understood why and how it worked and what it was doing. So I understand why the Greeks turned it into, we're forgiving them. But it took decades to shift out of the one world universal original blame that I'd been raised in, to start to understand, perception is a product of the mind. It's evidential. And if I have a goal that has something to do with blaming somebody else for this, then my mind is going to lie to me. There is, in that mind, there is no ability to honor truth. And one of the most important things to living a true human life is the ability to honor truth. And of course, when you're in, up to your sweet baby and alligators, it can be difficult that the objective was to drain the swamp. If you've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people, it can seem to be quite a challenge. But when you recognize there is only support for healing, and the more we are in resistance, it's like the process starts out and you get a little tap on the shoulder. Hey, buddy, have a look here. No, not me. Look, it's their fault. Again, that one world universal religion to blame. Then a little harder push comes. Now it's not just a tap on the shoulder, it's a shove. No, it's somebody else's fault. Next time it's a 2x4. And then as you build your vitality, as you go from that level 5 vitality to level 6 to 6.5 to 7 to 7.5, you go to bed at night at a level 7.5 vitality when you've been existing at a 5 for so long, and it's like you feel so good and you're just on top of the world, man. I am just rocking it. I got it. This is awesome. And here's the kicker you got to watch for, because the next morning you get up and you wonder if anybody got the number of the Mack truck that went through your room during the night because you're lower than a snake's belly. Well, wait a minute, Michael, that doesn't make sense. I've been doing the right things. Why would I be lower than a snake's belly after I hit this high? Because now that I've hit this level 7.5 high, and I've been carrying around a genetic level 0.7 toxicity, that genetic level 7.0 level vitality can now surface in me. The physical, the mental, the emotional toxicity that's been locked down and creating things like sores and cancers and disorders and diseases and such. I can now open and embrace those energy patterns. I take the load off of the tissue. I take the load off of what seems to be diseased. There is no such thing as physical disease. And somebody says, wait a minute, Michael, I was at the hospital and I saw the wounds on this. There are physical. Well, maybe you know better than Einstein, but let's step to another level of truth. Here's what Einstein says. On such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. You don't live in a material world, you live in an energetic world. If you go to the opening words in the book of John, it does not say in the beginning was the Word and the Word became flesh. It says in the beginning was the mind energy and the mind energy became flesh. When you engage in a quality of mind energy that's based in some form of hostility or fear, then you lock into tissue that vibration, literally that distorting energy that distorts physiology and looks like physical disease. That, I will offer, is the only cause of disease that there is. And that is the only true cure. When I take the offending mind energy becomes flesh. Literally, when you think of thought, they've shown in the cell biologist laboratory, when you think of thought, that thought becomes a molecule, a neuropeptide within your structure. It wasn't there a minute ago, and all of a sudden the non-material has become material. And that neuropeptide circulates around in your structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches. It lands on that cell, and when it lands on that cell, energetically, it inserts itself into the cell. And if we were sitting inside the cell as that neuropeptide landed on this particular receptor site, what we would see is what we call chemistry coming into the cell. We'd say, look at that chemical coming in here. It's literally the neuropeptide, the thought, inserting itself in the cell and becoming what we call chemistry on the level where we believe in chemistry. I remember back about 30 years ago, I was speaking at in an organization in, what city was it? In Indianapolis. And there was a professor from the local university that taught chemistry, and he came up to me after, and I had that discussion. He says, you know, Michael, I teach chemistry at the university level, and you're absolutely right. The truth is, we don't even have a clue what we're talking about. Chemistry is just a certain organization of frequencies, and the master organizer of frequency, listen to the word, organize, what turns into organic structure. The opening words in the book of John tell you exactly, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. And when I learned to own, be responsible for, and stop blaming everybody else for what's going on inside of me. And the blame game can be so subtle. You've got to really train your mind to watch for it. It's as subtle as, yeah, I was so upset about that. I was so angry about that. No, you weren't angry about that. There was no anger. Nobody's ever been angry about anything in their lives. But the person who's got anger in there, oh, they can have 1,000 things that they say they're angry about. But they're not angry for any because out there. They're angry because there's anger unresolved within them or within their generations. And anger is a disease. Anger is a frequency of disease. People think of or tell us that anger is an emotion. Anger is not an emotion. Anger is an anesthetic. And wherever you find anger, underneath it, you always find pain. I love Albert Einstein's statement about anger. He says, anger exists only in the bosom of fools. Anger is nothing more than a shot of whiskey, covering up the pain, feeling no pain. I don't want to feel pain. Anger comes up. The minute you can get somebody, and you know, anybody who's been in an intensive with us, where we see somebody whose rage is triggered, and we can get them to trust for a moment, to drop the rage, what do they do next? They go right into the tears and their pain. The anger was nothing but an anesthetic, a literal addictive drug that people use in order not to feel what's going on inside of them. And what Yeshua is saying with this particular passage is that if you are aware, if you are awake, he uses a metaphor, yes, then you will be able to observe yourself. You'll see what's happening. Again, let's read it. Saying 102. Woe unto them, the Pharisees, for they are like a dog sleeping in a manger of cattle. They're in the wrong place. They neither eat nor sleep. Pardon me, they neither eat nor allow the other animals to eat. And then he goes on and takes it to the next step of going within. Blessed is a man who knows in what part the robbers are coming. Is there something in your life that whenever it resonates in you, you lose your serenity? If so, notice what you did with your breath. Ah, that's one of the notifications the robbers are coming. And that's when it's time, he says, to go rise up and gather his domain or gird up his loins. Get the tools out. And one of the major tools that we're using, that we're offering, is that of the breath. You'll notice anyone that you watch in any form of hostility or fear, that hostility or fear is preceded or accompanied by an alteration in the breathing pattern. One either totally stops breathing altogether, holds the breath, or somehow alters a breathing pattern. As they do hold the breath, they're locking whatever the disintegrative energy is that they don't want to deal with in tissue. That's one of the first indicators. There's something I need to look at in me when I'm able to observe and notice my breath is moving. So that's what he's talking about here, is pay attention to your own physiology, pay attention to your breath, and know what tools you're going to use in order to resolve whatever is in your life, or whatever pattern. Perhaps it did not happen in your life. Perhaps it's a genetic pattern. Perhaps it's something that's come down with the genes. When you look at the kinds of hostility, fear, and insanity that have gone on in the past in our world, in the history of the world, it's pretty bizarre. So can you think of, a situation in your life where in the past your serenity has been evaporated and you've held your breath? And I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes and let yourself focus on that situation. And as you focus on that situation, allow yourself to take a deep breath and feel where in your physiology, if at all, your breath is restricted. And if you notice that it's restricted somewhere, and it could be, there's usually a physical tightness that goes with it. It could be the chest, it could be the jaw, it could be the buttocks, it might be the feet. A lot of people with restless leg syndrome, it's locked up energy in the hips and the thighs and the legs. And allow yourself to just gently take a breath and restore your breath to that place where there is tightness. In the Aramaic language, if you go to the ancient creation story, it does not say God sent out his spirit. It said God sent out his breath. It's our direct link. In Aramaic, it's rucha dekudsha. Properly translated is, there is a feminine elemental force in us that when activated will undo the effects of our errors and will deliver to us or teach to us the truth. Just taking a breath. And so take a moment. Breathe deeply into your tissue structure. And let everything soften. Just let it go. Focus into the strongest, clearest energy of love that you can fathom, that you can even imagine. And as we close the show, just allow yourself to continue to breathe into that place that's tight in you, the presence of love. Let it soften. Let it open. And out of a newfound awakening, create the best year yet of your eternal life. Thank you for joining us.